What's up, everybody? Welcome to the 3 and Out YouTube page. I'm John Middlekauff, and we are talking football all day, every day. Make sure you subscribe, like the video, share it with your friends. Let's roll, baby. Okay, let's do a little thing we call the mailbag at John Middlekauff. At John Middlekauff is the Instagram. Fire in those DMs. Get your questions answered here on the show. It's my Instagram. DM's wide open. You guys know the drill. Let's start here with JT Sports. Josh Allen is not better than Lamar. You make it seem like Allen always plays well in the playoffs when he nearly gave the wild card game to the Dolphins with Skylar Thompson with all those turnovers. Then he played garbage the following week and got embarrassed by the Bengals. He also choked the fourth quarter this past season against the Chiefs, divisional round, but it's Sean McDermott's fault. But you put all the Ravens losses in the AFC Championship on Lamar, but never talk about Zay Flowers' fumble inside the 5 that took away the game. Lamar is the second best win-loss record in the NFL since he's been starting right behind Mahomes, and the Ravens have had the 1 seed twice when he's won the MVP. He's also been a more efficient passer than Josh Allen is a turnover machine. Lamar Jackson takes care of the ball. I mean, let's not act like they both can't beat Mahomes. No matter who plays better, they both come up short in the end. Well, here's my thing. I think Josh Allen is better than Lamar Jackson. If you put Josh Allen last year on the Ravens, who have had, like you said, the number 1 seed, what happened? Once they got worked by the Bengals because the Titans. Lamar was bad. And last year was embarrassing. The Chiefs scored 17 points. Here are the playoff stats for the two guys. If you put Josh Allen on the Ravens these last 5 years, I think they have a Super Bowl. Josh Allen in the playoffs, 65%, 21 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, and 5 touchdowns on the ground. Now, he's played in 10 playoff games, partly because he's won more playoff games than Lamar. Lamar in 6 touchdowns, 6 picks, 57%, and 3 rushing touchdowns. The gap of these two guys in the playoffs, Lamar is a fantastic regular season player. So is James Harden. Who do you want to play in the playoffs? James Harden. Now, I don't think Lamar is James Harden. He cares about football. He works hard at football. I would want Lamar Jackson on my team. But this is no longer an argument. We have objective facts. The Ravens are a much better roster than the Bills, for example, last year. Losing that game, like you just don't shake. Losing that Titans game a couple years ago was a fucking embarrassment. And the one quote-unquote embarrassment by the Bills was something Josh Allen had no control over when he threw all those touchdowns on the road in Kansas City and his defense blew it. And even Andy Reid was like, yeah, this is unfair. Both teams should touch the ball. And that's what happens now. So we're nitpicking the elite of the elite here. And I don't think anyone could say with a straight face, if you gave every general manager, who would you want as your quarterback for the next 5 years? Out of the 32 guys, I think the number would be close to 32 with Josh Allen. Now, Lamar would get picked over the majority of other guys, not named Josh Allen and Mahomes, but give me a break. Like, we know what we've seen. We have the stats. We've had the eye test. It ain't fucking close. It's just not that close. Again, we're nitpicking the best of the best here. The best of the best. We do this a lot in the NBA. It's why Steph Curry and LeBron James, like, they don't have anything in common with Embiid and James Harden. They both make hundreds of millions of dollars, have all these all-star games. Joel Embiid, it's like the gap's wide at the top of the mountain. It really is. And Josh almost lost to Skylar. He didn't. He didn't lose. I mean, he's played more playoff games. Why? They've won more. And let's face it, you guys have had 2 of the worst losses at home in the last 5-6 years in the playoffs. The Titans game and the heavy favorites. Part of losing as a favorite is way worse. It just is. Now, yeah, that loss to the Bengals was bad. No arguing that. It was ugly. It really was. Well, what happened? Then the Bengals beat the Chiefs. I'd say they aged pretty well. They got worked. So did the defense. Ran it right down their throat. I don't think the notion that is not, it's just, he's better player. He's just a better player. I don't know how else to verbalize it. And that sounds like a criticism of Lamar. Like, he's a fantastic player. He's had an incredible start to his career. But a win-loss record, the Ravens have been winning for 25 years. Everyone wins there. Joe Flacco won there. Trent Dilfer won there. Like, quarterbacks are going to win. Now, Lamar, I think, is a better player, obviously, than Joe Flacco. But Joe Flacco had moments in the playoffs that Lamar simply has not had yet. Now, there's a lot of career left, but I don't know if this Ravens team is going to be quite as good as last year's team. Definitely not. I mean, they're the best defense in the league. The Ravens should have won both games by double-digit points. They should have beat the Chiefs, and they should have beat the 49ers. But you can say Zay Flowers fumble. Lamar was fucking terrible. I mean, he was skipping balls on wheel routes, which, as we're judging the highest level of competition, go around the sports. When Rory blows it, when when high-end basketball players blow it, like, they get criticized extra hard. Why? Because the expectations are super high. No one cares that Tua is average, beside the Dolphins. Like, we kind of know it. I've listened to Coward since the beginning my travel sales career right around college. I came across your pod, and I really enjoy it. I said I'm your favorite, but I didn't want to boost my ego here. I love how you discuss the entire operation. My dream career has always been an NFL front office. Mailbag question. As a scout, who is one mid, late, or underrated player you love for the Eagles? I saw Joe Ortiz, who worked in I only worked in the NFL for 3 years. But the day and age of, like, finding guys in the 70s and 80s that no one knows about, and all of a sudden it's like, how did they get this diamond in the rough? Those don't exist. And when you're in a draft meeting, I would say, and Joe Ortiz was on Rich Eisen, he put this pretty well. Every player on the draft board, obviously the top 100 guys, 6, 7 people watch them. Your GM, your assistant GM, your college director, multiple scouts, the position coach, the coordinator, the head coach. So within 7, 8 guys, there's not like, I'm banging the table harder. They're going to be 3 or 4. Let's say it's a polarizing player. Half are going to like him, half are not. But there's not a player on a draft board in the internet era, definitely the last 15 plus years, that's like, how did you find this dude from Texas State Western East South? It just doesn't happen. It really doesn't. So even though this was 2010, 2011, 2012, 13, it wasn't like that. Honestly, when I was at Fresno State, it was the same thing in recruiting. By the time the internet had really blown up and Rivals and some of these different sites, it's really, really hard to get a diamond. And the moment guys come on the radar, other people come sniffing around. And so many people talk. So I think I hear what you're saying, and I think there are legendary stories about, like, he was the only guy that saw Mickey Mantle play in high school. Like, those days are so over. I mean, so over. If there is a player that comes off the draft board on a given year, and of every team in the league doesn't have multiple grades on them, obviously, once you get to the 6th, 7th round, maybe your GM isn't super locked in on every player, but your college director, your scouts, a couple coaches, it's an NFL building. Maybe they're getting bigger. Just in a football building in general, isn't that big. You have how many coaches you have, some assistant coaches to the position coaches. You have your coordinators. You got multiple scouts in different regions, right? 6, 7, 4 to 6, 7 kind of range. You have several executives, and you're all kind of watching the guys. And the other thing is, right around after the combine, you do these things called cross checks. So every scout, some do it by region, some do it by position, some do it by somehow they group it. You have so many grades on a player. Now, I might like a player more than the GM, no different than you might like a player on your team more than your brother or your best friend. And you just kind of talk it out, right? Now, when you're talking as a fan or like we are in a podcast, there's not really a resolution. But eventually, when the board is getting set, that's where there's one decision maker. And he goes, well, I think we should slot this guy here. And that's kind of usually a combination of the GM and the coach. right? But there's not. There was one guy, and I've told this story, Andrew Sendejo, who played in the league for a long time, but he was playing for the Sacramento Mountain Lions, who was one of those leagues that happened for a year. I bet now with the XFL and the UFL or whatever the hell the league's called, that would be the only area. But in the draft, there's no like fourth round pick that only I graded and I'm screaming for and no one wants. It just doesn't work like that. Lately, I've been hearing a lot of talk about stadium atmosphere. I've been a Ravens fan since 2000 when they won the Super Bowl in 2001. I was about 12 years old at the time with no local NFL teams in LA. I'm going to my first Ravens game in November facing the Chargers at SoFi Stadium. I bought VIP tickets at the 100 level. We got a guy doing well in life. How can I maximize my first game? With VIP level access, would it be easier to get players to sign my jersey? Football's a little different than like baseball, for example. I remember being a kid, you wanted to get to the yard early. Maybe I get Matt Williams to sign my ball. Maybe Jose Canseco will sign my glove, right? In football, it's not as lax on game day. You have to get there really early when the guys are warming up kind of in shorts and a t-shirt. And you're at 100 level means you can get to the front of kind of the railing. I've never done that, so I can't really speak to that. I would say SoFi is pretty sweet. And stadium, some people hit me. Obviously, Philly, when they're good's a great atmosphere. The Ravens, the Lions now. And I think we all agree for the most part, the atmospheres and the pros relative, like it's just impossible to compare to LSU, to compare to Michigan, Ohio State, to compare to some of these collegiate atmospheres. SoFi, someone hit me up and said, SoFi's atmosphere is awesome. It's the best stadium I've ever been to. But part of having an awesome atmosphere is should be, if you go to a Chiefs game, right? If you go to a Ravens game, if you go to a Packer game, if you go to a Lions game this year, it's going to be the overwhelming majority. I mean, honestly, it should be well over 90%, 95% hometown. You go to an LSU night game, or a Michigan game, it's their home crowd. Not 100%, but much closer to 100 than like 80. And that adds to the atmosphere. When you go to SoFi, it's kind of split. Obviously, if they play the 49ers, but if they play the Cowboys, if they play the Steelers, if they play the Packers, you're not even talking 50-50. The other team will take over the stadium. The Ravens, I don't know if they'll be 50-50, but there's going to be a ton of Ravens fans there. So, like, you go to a Ravens home game, especially a big home game, you're all Ravens fans. And I would just have a good time. I don't know about you guys, but one thing I always regret in my life is I went to the Warriors game 7 against the Cavs when LeBron beat them and brought the championship home to Cleveland. And I got too drunk in the sense of I should have just had at most a beer or two, but I probably had about 15. And I kind of regretted looking back of not just, it was a historic moment. You don't know going to a game what's going to happen. I mean, you do a little bit more like a playoff game or a situation like that. But listen, I have no problem if you want to go to a game and get housed. But I kind of regret that. And I've always gone to games. I'm not a big like boozer if I'm going to a sweet game. I'll have a cocktail maybe, but I would enjoy it. You want to be able to remember everything that happened. Like in the 100 level, you're living well. I have a question for the mailbag. Rather than preseason of extending the season, why do you think of having a knockout cup tournament as a second trophy to win the NFL? You already have the perfect number of teams, 32, meaning it would be a 5-round knockout. All team enter in a random draw, and the winner stays until the final, with the winner getting the trophy. Well, part of that, the problem, it'd probably be incredible year one, but what's the point of the regular season, right? You just had a random draw. So let's say you had a 15, 17 games, whatever the season was. why does it matter where you finish? Because you could finish 16-1 and play a team with 3 wins. What if they beat you? Why does that team get rewarded for being terrible? I think there's pushback. Are they letting too many teams in the playoffs? And I think that's a pushback in sports in general, right? Baseball expanded their playoffs. It used to be a really big deal we won the pennant. I mean, I think if you ask the average 26-year-old in America that likes sports what it means to win the pennant, they'd have absolutely no clue. And they've expanded the playoffs, obviously, by a bunch of wildcard teams. The NBA has a play-in. They've added 4 total teams. Obviously, the NFL added 2 total teams. Now, I get the other side. This is business. You're trying to drive revenue, and the revenue is driven by the games. So I understand it, but I wouldn't be in favor of doing that. I like you thinking outside the box. Listen, there are no stupid questions, just stupid people. And you're not one of them. Clearly, you cannot win a Super Bowl without a top 6 to 8 quarterback or a stacked roster and a good quarterback on a rookie contract. Why do you think teams who do not have a top 6 or 8 quarterback sign their quarterbacks to massive extensions? Dolphins, now Cowboys in the recent past. Do you think it would be better to stay mediocre but somewhat relevant with a middle tier quarterback, or let go of them and bottom out for the chance at getting a top quarterback, most likely in the draft? If you were an NFL GM with a situation like this, or what would you do faced in a situation like this? Would you lose your other star players if bottoming out were to occur? Where is the starting point to build up a Super Bowl contending team? Coach, owner. I think it's very, very difficult. And one major difference, which has clearly benefited football, is tanking is not really a big thing. No one really tanks. It's happened really one time. I would say it feels like over the last 15 years. I'm talking a start to finish tank, like the Browns attempted to pull. I have no problem ever tanking in December if you have a couple wins. I'm all for controlling your own destiny at that point. But I don't think there's a team in the league, if you talk to the owner and coach, clearly some teams know they're not as good as others, that don't plan on, hey, we might not win the Super Bowl, but can we get 8 wins? Because winning in football is a really big deal. And when you start losing, you become irrelevant so fast. And the draft is a pretty big crapshoot. For as much hype as there is on all these quarterbacks, Caleb included, I'm recording this before Hard Knocks. I saw, I almost said Greg Olson, but it was Zach Ertz. I'd forgotten he was on the Commanders. But he said, stop saying Jayden Daniels is going to be good. He's good right now. And the hype on Jayden, on Caleb, on who else? Drake's, the hype's not very big, and Penix is on the bench. Bo Nix is 3rd string. But I think on those 2 guys that we know historically, it doesn't work out. It just doesn't. More than likely, Caleb or Jayden Daniels is just not going to be good. History tells us that. If you just pick those 2 players, the likelihood that both those guys are both top 10 quarterbacks, very, very rare. So just because you have hype prospects, there's no, you just never know. So I would do what basically every other GM does, try to win desperately. Now, once you're not winning, pivot, sell players at the trade deadline. But I would do everything in my humanly possible to win. And I think winning, really starts with the owner. Is he willing to pay? Is he willing to cut big checks for your own guys in free agency? Does he give you the green light to be aggressive in the draft? Does he support your staff? Does he give you the most money to hire assistant coaches? So it starts there with his checkbook. And does he not meddle? I mean, if he's telling you who to draft and who to sign and who to hire, then you're going to have problems. And then obviously the impact of the coach is, there's not a sport like it, right? Especially if you get the right coach who also calls plays, the impact he can have is just second to none based on basically every other sport. So I think you just try to win. You really do. Now, I think there are situations where you go, can we play this out another year? And that's where I think there's a balance, right? I wouldn't, if I ran the Dolphins, I wouldn't cut Tua. I wouldn't trade him for nothing, but I'd go, can we just play it out another year? Wasn't he on his 5th year option? Wasn't it scheduled to pay him well over $20 million? Couldn't we just go, let's just see this year? This is a big year. Let's just see how it goes. I'm never opposed to letting it play out, gain more information. Like, we've been winning, so the owner's kind of happy, right? We've made the playoffs a couple times. But what's the rush to kind of hitch my wagon as an executive, as a coach, to a player that I can't totally trust? I get Dak more than Tua. I just don't get Tua. I don't. Let me rephrase that. I mean, I get Tua the player. I don't get signing him to the extension right now. I don't. His agent can be pissed all he wants to. Like, what's Tua going to do? Like, Tua, you play well, you're looking at a $200 million payday. And if some reason the Dolphins don't want you, 3 or 4 teams will be lined up. Go win a couple playoff games. We just talked about Lamar. We know he struggles to do that. Not playing best ball at DraftKings? You're missing out. Here's what you need to know. DraftKings Best Ball Millionaire Contest is their biggest fantasy contest ever. We're talking 15 million guaranteed prize pool with 2 millionaires being crowned for the first and second place. If you're set it and forget it type, then Best Ball is for you. No waiver wires, no roster management, bigger roster so injuries won't end your season. Only the draft, and that's it. You're set for the year. 15 million prize pool. Still not convinced? Check this out. This year, DraftKings is offering everyone a Draft One, Get One special. Your $20 entry fee scores you a bonus ticket. Get in on all the best ball action. Download the DraftKings app and use the code JOHN. That's code JOHN for all customers who enter the NFL Best Ball 15 Millionaire contest to get a bonus ticket and get a shot at being crowned one of the 2 millionaires only on DraftKings. Using my girlfriend's Instagram. Huge Hawks fan from Tennessee. Cool part about, I guess this is true in all sports, but you meet people all over the country that are fans of teams from other places. It's always cool. And it always, I have a soft spot for that. Even though I hate them immensely, I also have a huge respect for them. Oh, my question is about the Niners. To do what they've been able to do consistently for the past 5 years is something that I respect. Do you think after 5 long years battling to get back to the Super Bowl, only to get back to lose in similar fashion to the same team, will take a toll on them mentally? I know everybody's expecting them to run it back, and rightfully so, but could you see them having a similar season to the Rams the season after their Super Bowl? Win a couple years ago. With the constant heartbreaks this team has gone through and the amount of noise and chatter coming out of their locker room, it seems plausible to me this could happen considering they have a lot of older key players. Well, if you remember the Rams season when they fell apart, one main reason was Matt Stafford got injured. If Brock Purdy were to get injured and they would have to go to Joshua Dobbs and Kyle Allen, who's definitely not Josh Allen, they would be in major trouble. If you told me Purdy has a major injury or misses a month or something, they would be screwed. So I would say that they just have too much talent on their roster if Purdy's playing. The other thing is their coach, again, this goes to Purdy and the same with Stafford. If McVay's there and Kyle's there and they have a good quarterback, they're just going to be good. They're going to be competitive. Now, you never know with injuries. I think the wear and tear, Kyle's like most teams, the OTAs are a joke. I mean, they really are. In the Niners for training camp, like Bosa, McCaffrey technically is injured right now, but Trent Williams, these guys practice like twice a week. So they get treated pretty well. This is not the Junction Boys, Bear Bryant. That's where I think it can wear you down. I think if you make all these runs and, the rules that used to be the hitting, the double days, you just kind of run out of juice. I don't think you do anymore, especially when you have guys under 30. It's like Tesla, you just recharge it and you just hope the charger doesn't catch on fire and burn your house down. Last episode, I heard you say you think Jayden Daniels could struggle in Washington, part due to him having a defensive head coach in Dan Quinn. But didn't Kliff Kingsbury walk away from a deal with Vegas to come to D.C.? Washington had to know Jayden was going to be theirs with the second overall pick. Kliff has coached up many successful quarterbacks, especially mobile ones. Caleb, I think Jayden is in a better situation. I know Jayden had neighbors in college, but he will have Scary Terry and Zach Ertz. So my question is, do you think Shane Waldron is a better OC than Kliff? Secondly, do you think Malik Neighbors will be a better pro than Terry McLaurin? I'll just call him Scary Terry. Starting, Malik Neighbors is more talented than Terry. If Malik Neighbors hits, you're looking at like a more physical Odell Beckham in his prime. I mean, you're looking at an elite player if he hits. But you never know. It's football. Daniel Jones, I wouldn't bet on it. But Malik Neighbors, the highlights coming out of Giants camp. I mean, he's got Jamar Chase physicality, but the high-end speed, the ball skills. I mean, he's a pretty special talent. Terry's a really good player. I mean, Malik has the upside. Terry's an excellent player, but I don't think nobody considers him like a top 5 or 6 wideout in the league. Malik Neighbors, if it works out in like 3 or 4 years, could be right up there with the best in the NFL at the position. But that's a big if. I would say Shane Waldron. I like that style of offense. Like, I don't like Kliff's style of offense. It's not for me. We talked about this the other day. You're just kind of a product of what you know, being around Pat Hill, old school offense, Jim Harbaugh. Andy throws it more, but there's a physical edge to him. Kliff's not my cup of tea when it comes to football. But like you said, like, he is tailor-made for guys like Jayden. I think comparing him to Kyler, who, talking with my guy from Fantasy Pros yesterday, Pat Fitzmaurice, Kyler's one of the more talented prospects in recent memory. Like, I don't think Jayden's as talented as him. 1, he's not as fast. 2, he's not as elusive. Kyler has an elite arm. He's just, now, obviously Jayden's taller, but that's the only thing that Jayden Daniels has over Kyler. He's taller. Kyler does everything better. To me, if Jayden Daniels becomes Kyler Murray, Washington's in really, really good shape. And when I say struggle, I just don't think their team's that good. I think it's going to be a big, big struggle. And the division's good. Like, we nitpick the Cowboys. They're dramatically better than Washington. Obviously, the Eagles are. And the Giants are pretty good on defense. So Washington's O-line sucks. And what are the Giants good at? Defensive line. So I also think I get very concerned with players. And I'm not anti-Jayden Daniels, but when you have a skill, people think, I'm sure I hate Lamar. I do not. I think Lamar is an awesome player. No guys that have been around him. The character stuff, I love everything I've ever heard about the guy. And one thing Lamar does a really good job of is when he runs around, avoiding hits, partly because he's so elusive and so fast, but he doesn't take a lot of huge shots. When I was with the Eagles, Michael Vick was probably the worst in NFL history at avoiding hits. Honestly, he like looked like he was looking for him, and he got injured a lot. And we talked about this yesterday on the Fantasy Podcast. Jayden took shots in college. And again, the SEC is, the light version of the NFL, obviously elite defensive players, and they played Florida State and he got crushed there too. You can't do that. But I think that's a hard skill to teach. You either kind of have it or you don't. And I think Kyler's pretty good at this too. And again, part of it, their skill set, that they're a little more explosive than Jayden laterally. There's just like an innate quality with them to kind of know. I feel like Jayden is a good athlete, clearly, but you watch him run around, maybe there's a combination of fearlessness and just the instincts of avoiding that just don't exist like they do for Lamar and Kyler. But saying that Kliff made Kyler a great player, Kyler's a better player. He was a better player coming out of college. I think if Kyler was in this draft, Washington would have taken him too over Jayden Daniels if he was coming out of Oklahoma and he was coming out of LSU. Say what you want about Kyler in the video games. I will never dispute his ability, because when he gets humming, holy shit, he's fun to watch. Because he's an elite talent. I don't know if Jayden Daniels is an elite talent. He's a really good prospect. I mean, the only knock on Kyler was height, which is a big knock. I mean, he's really small, but elite arm. He's actually pretty accurate. Elite speed, elite elusiveness, elite scramble and throw ability. As the quarterbacks are getting paid, I tend to really project what they can do with the team around them. If you had to guarantee one of these guys, Love, Hurts, Goff, or Lamar, will win the Super Bowl in the next 5 years, who would it be? It's a good question. I'm sorry, Ravens fans, but until Lamar proves me otherwise, you can't bet on him, because I've seen him with the best of the best team and can't get it done. Goff, their team is pretty stacked. This year is kind of wide open for them. I would say they got a pretty good chance this year to get to the Super Bowl. And if you get to the Super Bowl, you can win it. I would say something similar to Jalen Hurts. I mean, their team's pretty good on paper right now. I would say the difference with Jalen and Jared is Jared's had the same coordinator for his whole career in Detroit, really. So advantage Jared Goff there. To me, Jordan Love, until I see the Packers defense good, they can't win with the way they've been playing defense. Now, clearly they made a change, but until we see it on Sundays, you just never know. Because we thought they'd be better on defense some years, and it just didn't materialize. So if I had to rank it, I would go Goff, Jalen, 1A and 1B. Both guys have been to a Super Bowl, so they've proven they can get there. They've won playoff games. Lamar, 2, and Jordan Love, 3. I'm not saying Jordan Love can't do it. We saw him play well, but you can't make these runs if your defense is shitty. And the Packers, to me, the pressure is not on the offense and really Jordan Love this year. I think they're going to be fine. It's like, can you go toe-to-toe with some of these other physical defenses? Just recently been getting into golf and going out playing with buddies. Any recommendations for someone starting out? Have a good time. Enjoy yourself. Have some beers. Play $5 aside. I'd say practice, but you're not a pro. Practicing sucks. Just go play. Have fun. And if you really get into it and you suck, I mean, maybe find a guy around where you live and get a lesson. Fan from Australia. I actually just read on the New York Post that this guy was on a camping trip next to where the biggest crocs in Australia live, and fell into the water, and his wife was reaching down to help him out, and she was his only lifeline out, but she started to slip too. So he let go of her hand because he didn't want to drag her in, and obviously got eaten. And they found and euthanized the croc, and the croc was 16 feet long. I was thinking about this. If you were going to go down, would you rather get eaten by a crocodile or a shark? Now, the thing with a crocodile, they're going to eat you. The shark, you're just going to bleed to death because it bites you and you're not a seal. But that initial bite and the power of the shark and then just being out there in the water, tough question to ask or answer. I don't know. I think the crocodile would be worse. I really, in a river or some grimy lake with just crocodiles chomping on you, doing the spin, ripping your bones apart. At least Jaws just takes one bite and then takes off. Listening to your combo with Jake Rosenberg made me think Kirk Cousins' contract of $180 million with $50 million signing bonus. Could that mean after this year he might have around 3 years, $100 million left of owing? Assuming he is healthy post Achilles, would that become an attractive to a trading team? I know Atlanta would have a big dead cap, but could they expect a decent draft compensation? As a trading team with Cousins, 3 years, $100 million left owing sounds a lot more attractive than $200 million for 4 years that people are talking with Dak Prescott. Well, there are a couple of variables here. Kirk Cousins is a no trade clause, but if they were going to bench him and go with Penix, that would get waived. You'd have to look. One thing Jake talked about is the way cash goes. So if over the next, I don't know, 6 months, the Falcons have paid, let's just pick a number, because I think 90 guaranteed. Let's say they've paid, I'm guessing, I don't have the contract in front of me, 70 of it. You're not on the hook for that much as the trading team. Now, his value, if you're benching him, the question would be why. So did he get benched because you're kind of doing a Favre Rodgers or a Rodgers love? I know Rodgers didn't get benched, but you know what I mean. You just like, we think this guy's going to be better. Mahomes, Alex Smith. Let's just pivot. If that's the case and he's played well and you guys won 10 games and we're in a playoff game and won the division, he would have value. If you're going to Penix because he doesn't look as good as he's looked, then I don't think he has as much value at all. Doesn't mean you can't unload the contract, but I don't think you would get any trade compensation of any importance. Question for the mailbag. What's your take on fantasy football? Do you participate in any leagues? Do you think their popularity will decline due to the vast legalization of sports betting? Full transparency, I've never been a big fantasy guy. I've never played. Maybe I did play in one league one time with like the radio station. I mean, a decade ago. It's never been my thing. For whatever reason. Now, I have, when I lived in California and DraftKings kind of came on the scene, remember the year when DraftKings and FanDuel, DraftKings podcast, so pretend I didn't even say that other name, were just every other ad. It was incredible. I mean, they spent a lot of coin early on. Well, obviously gambling wasn't legal then anywhere beside the like Vegas or whatever, but you could play daily fantasy. And I used to play that all the time. And I'll dabble, like play some $5-10 daily fantasy games on a given week just to be entertained. But I don't play leagues like the Fantasy Pros guys, like a lot of you guys, Matt Berry, Field Yates, all those guys. The thing with gambling, and I do agree that over the next decade, because ultimately what fantasy is, I think fantasy brings an element that gambling doesn't. I know some guys that play in leagues that are like $1,000 buy-ins. Obviously, there are some legendary leagues with multimillionaires. Some of you guys play in leagues that, I don't know, $100 buy-in, whatever the buy-in is. There is a communal play with your friends aspect. I do think the older you get married, you have kids, it can be more, it's easier to gamble. It's easier to be like, oh shit, I kind of like this team +4 this week. Then to set your lineup, follow it, waiver wire. I think it's tailor-made for younger dudes with less time or more time and less things going on. I do think it gets more difficult, which is where gambling comes in, which also the older you get, ideally you should have a little more money, easier to get involved. So I think fantasy football has played a huge, huge role in the casual popularity of the NFL. But to me, it's like, and this is no disrespect because I respect it because I know it's important to the game that I love and all of us love to watch and talk about. As gambling gets bigger and bigger, it's going to feel, this is a guess, a little like JV versus varsity. Now, that doesn't mean fantasy is going to go away. It doesn't mean that these leagues are going to stop. But I do think that gambling is just, it's always been important to football. This is the sport that we gamble on first and foremost in this country. But the access has been difficult. I mean, you could have a bookie. Trust me, I've made some payments in the back of a Burger King parking lot. But those days are kind of over. And the ability to do everything on our phone, you just don't have to follow as much. I think part of fantasy, what makes it difficult is if you have like, you're an accountant or you're a doctor or whatever, and you love football, it can be difficult. And how often do you hear, especially people my age, like once you get in your late 30s, 40s, like, oh, I didn't even know this guy was injured. I didn't even have a quarterback this week. I think that happens more and more. And I think those guys kind of phase out and get more into gambling. But the element of doing it with your buddies, there's nothing like that, right? I mean, what's the point of living if you can't have some activities with your close friends or your close colleagues? So that's something that gambling, let's face it, when I gamble, I like to watch the game by myself and pace around. It's a very isolated act. Where fantasy, if you're in a league, is much more communal, right? You can be on a text chain with everybody. So there are elements that gambling can never quite bring to the table. But I do think there are elements of, I mean, you can win, you name the price, depending on what you're willing to bet in 4 hours. That's not really the way fantasy works. Daily fantasy works that way, but yeah, we'll end on that one. That was a good question. So respect to my fantasy people. I think it's difficult. The hard part for me is the way we talk about football, the importance of football. And then you get to fantasy and the running back is the most important player. And I get it, the way it's scored and everything. That always threw me off. I guess it was a little more normal back in, like, if you were playing in 2002. But all we talk about now is the quarterbacks. They're all making the most money. They clearly are the most important player on a given team to have success. That guy has to play well for you to succeed. And it's like, hey, you get this guy, you get like Jared Goff, in the whatever round. I think he's doing just a Pro Bowler. And you're taking his backup running back over him. I don't know if that's the case, but you know what I mean. But it is what it is. It's always been that way. I know this. It's fantasy for podcasts. The dude we add on for Fantasy Pros. It's a big business. It is. So you're a big business. You're doing a shitload of downloads. You're a top 10 podcast, and you're making. I respect you. I don't do it, but it doesn't mean I don't respect it. Right? Like I'm not ordering every UFC fight. I have nothing but admiration for Dana in that business and what they've built. It's fucking incredible. Hell, I loved wrestling growing up, like probably a lot of people, boys my age, because of Stone Cold and The Rock. I do not watch it anymore. I have a lot of admiration for the way that business operates. Vince obviously has got some shit going on, but Triple H, and every time I see him, and Colin's old agent, Nick Khan, like that thing's a big boy business for a reason. It's a well-run thing. I don't watch it, but I'm not one of those people that doesn't respect the following, the interest, and the revenue capabilities they have, and just the behemoth that has been built and is continuing to roll. Keep the train on the tracks. Rolling on down, no slowing down. It's impressive. In fantasy, kind of feels kind of similar. It's big. It's massive. I'm an outlier. I do all this stuff with football, talk about football, watch football for a living. I just don't play.